Good evening, everyone. Good evening. I know it's really hard to stop great conversation and dinner, and for those of you who already have dessert in front of you, you are enjoying something called the Bowdoin log, which is so simple yet so delicious. It's one of our favorite things, and I'm not going to lie, when we bring those out, we often do this when we have our fly-in programs where we have students coming to visit the college, and I'll be sitting at dinner with them, and the Bowdoin logs come out, and I'm always sitting with somebody at a table, a student, who doesn't want it. And it's all I can do not to be like, you gonna eat that? Because I'm so excited that the Bowdoin logs are here, so enjoy your Bowdoin log. I'm Whitney Soul. I'm the Dean of Admission and Student Aid here at Bowdoin, and I'm so excited to have you here for this conference. And I want to introduce Janet Lohman, who is our Dean of Students, and we want to talk a little bit about how this conference came to be, what the original idea was. So I'm going to let Janet talk a little bit about that.
Before we get started, actually, I have done this enough that I want to actually thank Dining before we get started, because they have this way of disappearing. So can we just thank Dining? I hope you are enjoying our food here at Bowdoin, because it is ranked #1 in lots of publications. So Whitney asked me to talk a little bit about how this got started, and what I'm going to sort of say is that Whitney and I have gotten to know each other over the last couple of years. I'm the Dean of Students here, she's in admissions. We partner together in lots of different ways, and we used to have these conversations where I'd say to her, I don't know how you do your job, and she'd say to me, I don't know how you do your job. And it really was this great relationship in ways in which we were trying to sort of understand how each of us did our jobs. I still don't want her job, and I don't think she wants my job, but we know each other a little bit better. And so really it came to be that Whitney, I will say Whitney was really the spearhead in this. She said, well, how do we think about how we think about access, how we think about what we're doing for our students in best preparing them for what this place looks like, and how we work with CBOs and college counselors, how we work with admission staffs, and then ultimately how we work with student affairs to create this arc of understanding for how we communicate in the best ways. We all want our success for our students, but how do we ensure that what I'm saying to a student is something that maybe they've heard previously from either admissions or from high schools or from CBOs, and how we can create this sort of conversation and smooth it out a bit so that we're not as siloed in the work that we do. So this started 4 years ago. The first year, it was a few of us. I'm looking at a few of us. I think there were 12 of us at the table, 15.
Not very many.
And we decided to make it a think tank. And it was like, what do we want out of this? How do we think about this? Who do we want to bring to the table? How do we create this sense of what we want to envision it? And we actually came up with Casco that same, right? We had case studies. I just pulled out all my stuff today, and we sort of did this real deep dig on what we wanted this to look like. The second year, we brought 30 people, again, from high schools, from CBOs, from admissions, and from student affairs to start this conversation and enrich it. Last year, we held a sabbatical. And now we're back to this. And it is, I don't even have the words. Do you?
It's amazing. It's amazing. And I will say that original group that thought about, when Janet and I sort of flushed out the conversation, it was really looking for blind spots, right? Like recognizing that in each of our domains, we talk about these issues a lot and do our very best work, but realizing that sometimes the domains are not always connected in the ways that we think that they are when we're trying to do our very best work, so we were trying to make that fluid connection. And that first year was Art Rodriguez, who is here, who's the Dean of Admission at Vassar, and Emmanuel Moses from Opportunity Network, who's not with us tonight, Dan Blednick from TEAC in New York City, and Will Kerr from Achievement First in Hartford. And it was a really great group to sort of think about what do we want to do and everything that Janet just described. We took last year off because we had really good ideas after year 2. We knew how much work it was going to take to develop it into what those ideas were, and we didn't have a staff person available to really help us have that come to be last year. So rather than hoping it could work, we put a pause on it until we knew that it could. And I'm just going to, while he's putting food in his mouth, mention Justin, who you have all heard from, and you'll hear from again later this evening, but who took this project and created this amazing opportunity with all of you here in so many important ways. So for Janet and for me and for Art, who was part of the original planning year, to see all of you here interested in these topics and getting to be here at Bowdoin and see Maine is just really exciting for all of us. Very good. So I just want to say one more thing about this program before I introduce our speaker, which is one of the important aspects of how we thought about this in the beginning and that we've been protective of as it's growing is what we see as a unique experience in these conversations is that it's casual, in that you'll see in the schedule that there are facilitators in the sessions that are really just meant to have, there are folks who have really good experience on the topic and who we thought we would be really good at helping keep a conversation moving, but no presenters. It really is meant to be organic, helpful, fruitful conversation in a place where we can really put everything out there that we're thinking about in space with others who work at different levels of the spectrum. And by working in mixed groups and then working in like groups, and by like groups I mean an admissions group or a student affairs group, having been mixed up in hearing about the different issues gives us a chance to then really focus on how to bring things back into our domains to do the best work with having gotten really good spectrum information. So we hope that you will find that useful as you go through the next couple of days. Thanks, Janet. So one of the great things that I get to do this evening is introduce Angel Perez, who is our guest speaker. And Angel and I got to know each other in particular a couple of years ago working on we went to do a panel presentation for our high school junior kickoff in Seattle, and we were paired together. We spent time in Uber cars together, and I remember leaving that experience and thinking, Angel and I are going to do something together, right? Like, I've just met a person that I'm going to figure out how to connect with on a project that matters to both of us, because we have a lot of the same interests and our energy is in the same place, and we need to find a way to merge it. And so having Angel come and be our speaker this evening was a great opportunity to see what I hope is the first of many experiences where Angel and I can work together beyond working together on NESCAC, which is a whole separate thing. So let me just tell you a little bit about Angel before he takes the space. Angel currently serves as the Vice President for Enrollment and Success at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. And in this role, he manages admissions, student aid, career development, and student access oversight, and has implemented values-based and student-centered approach. His efforts have focused on strategic retention initiatives, design thinking, first-generation student support, leadership training, and fellowships. It's a big scope. He has a capacity for this amazing work given his own experience, and I'm going to take you through not everything that he's done, but some of the highlights, including being a Fulbright alumnus and also part of the Fulbright peer review. He's a fellow at the Bowen Institute for the Policy on Higher Ed. He was appointed to the New England Board of Higher Ed. He's a member of Forward 50, which is a very exciting Gates-funded initiative to address higher ed challenges and solutions to Congress. He's a trustee to the United World College in Costa Rica, the Berkshire School, and the Hartford Youth Scholars. He's the former chair of Skidmore College's Alumni Association and former chair of the Deans for NESCAC, which is the New England Small College Athletic Conference, to which Bowdoin also belongs. And if that doesn't have your attention yet, let me keep going. Angel received NACAC's Muir Editor Award for the most significant contribution to the Journal of College Admission, which I think a lot of you have probably read that publication. He received 2 awards from Claremont Graduate University for excellence in the study of higher ed, several awards for his work on behalf of first-generation and low-income students. And finally, Angel earned his BS degree from Skidmore College, an MA from Columbia University, and a Ph.D. from Claremont Graduate University, and certification in pedagogy from the Derek Bok Center for Teaching and Learning at Harvard. So tonight, Angel has a lot of experience to share with us, and I'm sure will be quite inspiring. Angel.
Thank you, Whitney. When I sent her, or my assistant sent somebody, the bio that literally lives on the Trinity College website, I didn't think you would literally read it. But thank you so much. As I was listening to her speak, I was like, gosh, I should be really exhausted. But I'm actually energized, I promise you. I'm really, really energized. And I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for Whitney and her colleagues at Bowdoin and the Casco committee for inviting me to be here. I also want to give a special shout out to Justin, who I am calling the logistics guru of this entire conference. Thank you so much for everything that you have done to get me here. And I'm also excited to be back at Bowdoin. I actually haven't been to Bowdoin. I want to say it might be like 12 or 15 years or something like that. So I'm excited. We get typical Maine weather here tonight. So very, very happy to be here. But I'm particularly happy because when I learned about the topic of this conference and what it is that you will all be focusing on for the next day or so, I really realized that it resonates with the work in my own career, but also what I think is the future of higher education and secondary education, that we all have to be working together across sectors in order to make sure that our students that we are going to be serving are going to be set up for success. So as I was thinking about what I was going to talk to you guys about today, I actually thought that I would start a little bit with my own story, because I think that when you hear people's stories, it causes you to reflect on your own story and why it is that you might be sitting here in this room doing this work. And if you're like me, by the month of June, you're probably a little exhausted. You're probably a little beaten down. Depending on the politics of the year, you might even be a little bitter about what's been happening. I'm assuming those smiles mean this resonates with you. But I would like you for this evening to go back to why you started doing this work, whether that was a year ago or whether that was 25 years ago. Why did you get into this? Because we so often, especially around this time of year, get so caught up in the politics and the administrative minutia and those roadblocks that we end up with this tunnel vision, and that tunnel vision moves us further and further away from the original reason why we decided to do this work. So for me, this is a really personal story. Some of you may know, because I recognize a lot of faces in the room, I was a first-generation, low-income student to college. I was born in Puerto Rico and raised in the projects of the South Bronx in the 1980s and early 90s, when the South Bronx projects were a pretty challenging place to navigate. I came from a family where there literally were nights where we weren't exactly sure where the next meal was going to come from. And if you look at the data from what happened to kids in the projects of the South Bronx during the time that I lived there, statistically, I should not be standing up here before you talking about higher education and student success in the United States. But two things happened in my educational career. I call them pivotal moments. That's an academic term that I've stolen that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But two pivotal moments that happened in my own academic career that really fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life. The first was in high school. I went to a high school with over 4,000 kids in a building. I went to Martin Luther King High School on 66th Street in Amsterdam. Anybody know Martin Luther King? It's no longer MLK. It's like broken down into institutes because someone figured out 4,000 kids in a building doesn't work. I used to have to get there at 7 o'clock in the morning because in order to get to my class, it took an hour to get through the metal detectors in order to get into the building. And so that was my high school experience. But even in that environment, a counselor, a guidance counselor, who was not my guidance counselor, by the way, with 650 kids in her caseload. And I know that because I still stay in touch with her, and I called her up the other day and I said, I'm going to give this talk. How many kids were in your caseload? 650 were in her caseload, and she took notice in some of the extracurricular activities and work that I was doing, and literally one day stopped me in the hallway and said, young man, what are you thinking about for college? And I knew college existed because I watched The Cosby Show, and I knew that kids could go to Hillman from The Cosby Show, but I did not know how that would happen for me as a reality. And she actually took me under her wing, even though she was not my guidance counselor, because my guidance counselor did not have the time with her 650 kids in the caseload to really talk to me about college. And she would take me and make me go to the college office when admissions counselors would come to speak about college. And some of these admissions counselors literally just painted a picture for me of a world that I knew nothing about and a life that I could potentially live that, you know, I just couldn't imagine for myself. So that was pivotal moment number one. And pivotal moment number two was when I arrived on the campus of Skidmore College. And shout out to Skidmore, because I think there's some people here from Skidmore College. So when I arrived on the campus of Skidmore College, that I was admitted through the Higher Education Opportunity Program there, that they put strategic systems in place to ensure that I did not just survive Skidmore College, but that I thrived at Skidmore College. And, you know, it certainly was not an easy experience, but it was so powerful that there were all these people in my corner, champions that I had all over the campus that were really vouching for my success. So when I graduated from college, I remember crossing the stage and saying, I'm not really sure how I'm going to pay this back, but I am going to make sure that I pay it forward in some way, shape, or form. So the fact that people were willing to do all of these different things for me is really the reason why I do this work. And I can guarantee you that at your own schools, community-based organizations, foundations, and colleges that you all represent in this room today, there are hundreds and thousands of students waiting for you to do exactly the same for them. So while I say all of this, I also fundamentally understand that from the time that I went to college, which was admittedly about 24, 25 years ago, a lot has shifted dramatically. The world is changing, and for those of us who do this work, it has certainly gotten a lot harder. For higher education, I've never seen such dramatic shifts. It's caused by external forces across the nation, and in my opinion, I actually think that we are in a national crisis in American education. And every person in this room is actually capable of helping us get through it. So you've probably heard the headlines. It's lovely to have thunder. This is like powerful. It's like building up what I'm going to talk about. I love it. I'm going to remember this for a long time. So you've probably heard some of these headlines, right? Student loan debt, low graduation rates, decreased state and federal funding, being asked to do more with less. Our students are arriving with greater mental health issues than ever before. We're living in an age of untethered politics. And we have these shifting demographics that are really sort of shaking the foundation of everything that we know in education. So in many respects, there's never been a more challenging time to work in education, but I also say there's never been a greater opportunity to work in education, because I'm an optimist, and I do believe that you never let a good crisis go to waste. So I say to you, believe it or not, that this is our moment. So you've probably heard some of these headlines as it relates to low-income first-generation students, right? So you've got low-income students with low graduation rates, high-achieving low-income students where elite colleges are falling short. For poor students, getting into college is harder than it seems. Stories of first-generation students feeling dumb, poor, and confused. These are all literally taken from headlines in newspapers and media outlets. And so we certainly have a lot of challenges ahead of us for those of us that are in this room really passionate about this particular population. But I also think that we should take a moment and realize how far we've come, because really throughout, if you think about history, we have never had such a huge focus on this particular population. I mean, the fact that we're even sitting in this room is extraordinary. And just last week, Michelle Obama was hosting her summit for first-generation student success. So there is a huge awareness in the country around these issues. So I see this as really a pivotal moment and an opportunity for us to really think about how we take advantage of it and really use this to make a difference for our students. So we know that the world is changing, and this is what I mean by using this moment that we're living in as an opportunity. While most of us in this room are absolutely passionate about first-generation, low-income students, students of color, so on and so forth, I can guarantee you, especially if you work at the college level, that maybe not every single person in your alumni base has drank that Kool-Aid and is really on board with you, right? But what I see is an opportunity for us to bring people along and use these demographic shifts that are happening in the country as an opportunity for us to transform our work and our institutions. Now, I know that changing institutions, especially institutions of higher education, is very challenging. I heard somebody tell me the other day that at this point the church is moving faster than higher education. Like, you know, we've got some struggles when the church is moving faster than higher education. But these demographic forces that we are facing are actually going to force us to move much faster. And here's why. Because if we don't, everything that our boards and presidents care about will fail. Because the demographics are all pointing in one direction. And if we are not setting up our students for access and success, what the powers that be are really focused on will not necessarily go well. So I'm somebody who really thinks about how do I use data and the power of the now to basically move the needle on issues of access, student success, and student preparation and persistence. So one of the things that I've been doing at my own institution is using all of the demographic data that is out there to really hone the message in that we have to transform ourselves as institutions of higher education. So for those of you that can't see in the back, this is WICHE data, the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education. And if you look at the projected change in high school graduates, this goes through 2022, particularly here in New England, we've got some really big challenges. Fastest dropping, and then the second fastest dropping in the Midwest. What they don't tell you in the red, which is places like Texas and Arizona and Nevada and California, is that yes, the population is growing, but the population is growing with low-income first-generation students to college. We probably have all read about this in the media, but the numbers are pretty clear that US students will be majority students of color. And this chart represents the changes between 2060 and projected for 2060. This line here in the purple, up to the 39%, represents Hispanics. So again, using this data with your constituency, very, very powerful. And if that has not convinced your constituency that perhaps investing in change is important, this certainly will. This is actually a slide that I have used with my board of trustees and the faculty and all of the powers that be at Trinity College about the fact that there are just fewer students with the ability to pay to go to college in the United States. So this chart, because I know it's hard to read in the back, says there are 4.34 million 18-year-olds in the United States. So that's the 100%. Of those, only 75% of them graduate from high school. Of those, only 47% of them attend college. Of those, only 28% of them, and I'm going a little blind here, also actually express an interest in going to a four-year college. Of those, only 5% obtain high test scores. And I work at a test optional institution, so I'm certainly not preaching about test scores here, but it's one of the ways that this research firm used data to figure out, institutions like the Bowdoins and Vassars and the Trinities of the world who would be eligible. Of those, only 0.4% of those families make $200,000 or more a year. And by the way, we all know that if your family makes $200,000 a year, you probably still qualify for financial aid if you have 3 or 4 kids in college, right? And of those, only 0.2% have an interest in going to a private institution. And so for many people, they would see this and I could not have timed that better. That's awesome. No, that's literally how I felt the first time I saw that chart. You know, but I will tell you that this chart has been so powerful in my pursuit of ensuring that we exponentially increased our financial aid budget. I said, folks, we want people in the seats, right? We need to make sure that we are responding to the demographic shifts. And so the reason I share this with you is because, again, we can use this kind of demographic crisis, if you will, to really try to move our agenda on issues of access and affordability in the future. And these numbers are not anything that we're talking about in the future. This is actually happening. So this is a photo, actually, that I took from the LA Times of the 2018 graduating class of the University of California at Irvine. 50% of them were first-generation college students. Now, it is California, it's a different demographic, but that demographic is certainly predicted to spread across the entire United States. So I do think we can all think about ways in this room that we could actually seize this opportunity. And I know that oftentimes you go to conferences and everybody talks to you about what the problems are, but nobody gives you a couple of tips on some solutions. So I thought that I would put together some ideas based on my own experiences, but also based on what some of the research out there says and some of the things that some of my colleagues are doing across the country. So we definitely need to transform our approach if we're going to begin to move the needle on access, success, preparation, and persistence. The first thing is I thought I would start with something that every single person in this room could do. And that is something that a sociologist named Roberta Espinoza in California calls pivotal moments. She actually wrote a book called Pivotal Moments. Check it out. And what she talks about is actually what happened to me, which is someone literally created pivotal moments in my life, tapped me on the shoulder and said, you too can go to college. You too can be successful. You too can persist in college. And every single person in this room actually has the power to do that. And so creating those pivotal moments, even if you say, I'm going to impact one person, I mean, we've got over 70 people in this room. That's a lot of lives that can be changed based on your individual work. The next is breaking down the us versus them. And I think that if you're sitting in this room, you already get that, right? You would not be coming to a conference if you felt like you needed to live in your little financial aid bubble or your admissions bubble or your student affairs bubble. That the future of success really lies when all of the sectors, K through 12 and higher ed, are really talking to each other across the board and breaking down these walls and becoming a little bit more transparent with each other. You know, we like to protect our turf and our territories, but in order for us to really create success for our students, we're going to have to break that down a little bit more. I know this probably doesn't make everybody happy, but I really think that in the environment that we are living in, we all have to become political. Because everything that we are trying to do in terms of success for our students is political. Decrease state and federal appropriations. High school counselor caseloads above 600, 700, 800 in the state of California, for example. DACA policies, Pell Grants. These are all things that are political, and we often feel like that's somebody else's job to go out there and advocate, but really we all have to become a lot more involved now and use our voices, especially as people on the front lines. Another thing I think we could all try to take a stab at is simplification. We sure have done a great job in admissions and financial aid, particularly, of creating a really complicated process, right? And if you're on the high school side, you feel that. You may work at a school also where, you know, even just the process of getting these kids through and coming into the college office and applying is complicated. And so really trying to do everything you can at your own institution, but also advocating politically on the national level for that is important. The other thing is looking beyond the name. And what I mean by that is not just for those of you on the high school side where you send kids to college, but those of us on the college side thinking about how we partner with institutions who may not necessarily be in our brand. Because the reality of the matter is, especially since I've been in this work, you know, when you pick up the local newspaper or the New York Times or the Washington Post, everybody feels that elite colleges are going to solve the college access problem. And when you look at our numbers, that's actually just not going to be the case in this country. If we're not focused on public education, if we're not focused on state and federal appropriations, we need to make sure that we're partnering with those institutions too and sort of let go of that prestige factor. And then the last one that I think all of us can also do is we must listen to our students. How many times have I actually been in a room that is developing a college access plan or marketing plan for low-income first-generation students, and we don't even ask low-income first-generation students for their opinion or their advice? You'd be really surprised how much we can actually learn from them. Or even on the college level, where we've had, you know, at a place like Trinity, we bring first-generation students together and have them teach us about what the challenges are and what it is that we need to provide for them in order for them to be successful. And then the second part of this is that if we're really going to make change, then we need to transform our institutions. And it starts with the admissions process. I do think we need to rethink admissions in this country. We're starting to move the needle, but we really have an admission system that has not been changed since probably the 40s, 50s, and 60s, right? We still have a nation that is highly over-reliant on test scores, even though we know all the research shows it is not the best predictor of success. We know there are other ways that you can gauge for success in this process, but we're still so sort of stake in the ground around thinking about our admissions process. And so it has to absolutely start there. And I am happy to see that many institutions are thinking about moving the needle there. The second is that we need to create immediate connections between admissions and student success. And that might be called student affairs in your office, or that might be called academic affairs. But that antiquated model of admissions admits them and then literally pushes the files over to academic and student affairs and says, good luck, that does not work anymore. And it's really a model that at my own institution we have seen work really well, because it is amazing what happens when during the summer admissions is transferring knowledge over to the student success office and trying to figure out how do we put systems in place even before the student arrives to make sure that they are successful. And again, as our demographics are changing, I think we're going to need to do that a lot more. Many of you in this room know this, but assume nothing about social and cultural capital that our students walk in the door with. Because in higher education particularly, I don't know if you sort of think about it this way, but we speak a really funny language. Some students don't even know what a registrar is, right? A couple of weeks ago, somebody said, what is a bursar? Have no idea what that is, right? And actually, assuming that our students are coming in and that we actually have to really rally around them and give them that kind of knowledge is very, very important. The other thing is we have to do a better job at normalizing failure and demystifying the imposter syndrome. All of our students are walking around campus feeling like everybody knows something that I don't know. And the reality is they're all feeling that way. And the minute you bring it out of the closet, it is amazing how empowering that is and how students end up supporting each other, and they're also a little bit more willing to ask for help. We have to reevaluate all of our policies because they have unintended consequences. And what I mean, and particularly at traditional historic institutions, I guarantee you that if you went back to your college campus, there are probably policies that have not been revisited for about 20 years. And I am speaking from experience. I'm happy to use Trinity College as an example. My colleague Jennifer Bazil is here. She's laughing because we are really on a campaign around the entire campus to figure out what are the policies that actually shoot our students in the foot. Unintended, absolutely unintended, but some of our registrar policies, some of our academic affairs policies, really hurt some of our students, and particularly students who don't know how to navigate the process. And so the more that you could actually try to tackle these things on your campus, the better. The next one that I'll talk about is break down walls and get the adults out of the way. How many times have you had the conversation where someone says, well, I'd really like to change this, but you know, so-and-so, she's a little bit difficult to work with, so we can't really do that, right? Particularly at institutions where you've had people working for a really, really long time. What I have found in my time in higher education is that a lot of times the adults are the people who are in the way of student success. And it's because so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so, and so doesn't want to go, you know, for the elephant in the room. And I see heads nodding, so everybody has had that moment, right? Again, I speak from experience. We are tackling this at my institution, and it is not easy, and it is political, and it is challenging, but it is amazing what happens when you work through that, and what happens on the other side, and how many more students you can help and support. And then the last thing I'll say around this is that you really, if you choose to do this work at this moment in time, you really have to realize that you're going to have to become a politician. If we work in education, we all know that education is a shared governance system. Somebody can't come in and just put the gauntlet down and say, this is what we're going to do tomorrow. So your power actually lies in the power of persuasion. The more you can persuade people to come over to your side, whatever that side is or whatever you're trying to do, you know, data, all the kinds of things that I was showing you, the more successful you will be. But those things are political, and a lot of people aren't necessarily comfortable in that space. But the more that you can practice that, the more that you will actually be successful at making change and transforming your access and success possibilities. So I thought that I would end with a story, because we are all here for students, and we all love stories. Now, I know that I'm not supposed to have favorites, but I do, and Henry Chavez here is one of my favorites. By the way, he knows that I am talking about him and telling his story tonight, so I'm not giving anything away in public that he has not given up himself. But Henry was a low-income, first-generation DACA college student who came from El Salvador and was raised his teenage years in Boston. And he also had a pivotal moment where a counselor in his Boston public school saw something in him and said, have you ever thought about going to a liberal arts college? And of course, he had no idea what a liberal arts college was. He knew that he probably wanted to go to college, but he certainly did not know how he was going to get there. And his school counselor eventually actually ended up bringing him to campus, because even though Trinity's only 2 hours from Boston, for him that might as well have been China, because he was the student who really did not leave sort of the Boston radius. And so she actually brought him to campus to encourage him to apply to the institution. And eventually he was admitted, and he felt like a foreigner on the campus. He didn't really have the social or cultural knowledge needed to navigate this historic liberal arts institution. And I remember he told me a story about his first day of class. He freaked out and left the office, the professor's classroom, because the professor was talking about office hours. He didn't know what office hours were, so he freaked out and called his mother and says, I've already missed stuff, and I was supposed to be somewhere, and I haven't figured out where I was supposed to be. So again, that social cultural knowledge that he did not have. But what ended up happening with him is, you know, I asked him, because he has now graduated, he graduated last month, how did you make it through the institution? Because he ended up becoming a very successful student. And he gave me 4 points that led to his success. And the first was that there were people that helped him to make meaningful connections. And he said, I didn't know how to navigate this space, but there were people in the multicultural affairs office, student affairs office, that really helped me to learn that knowledge that I needed about what is a registrar, what are office hours, what is a syllabus, literally needed to learn that along the way. The second was that he made connections by starting where he felt most comfortable. And he said, if you had taken me and put me in a fraternity immediately, I probably would have dropped out of Trinity College. He said, but the connection was made with the multicultural houses. I felt a little comfortable. Then I started expanding my world a little bit. He actually eventually joined a fraternity, which he said is the last thing he thought he would ever do during his college experience. The third is that he said, I finally figured out that I wasn't the only one with imposter syndrome. He said, I finally figured it out through clubs, organizations, and some of the activities that were put on by student affairs. And he said, and that was such a liberating feeling that all of these students were actually struggling with what I was struggling. And then finally, he said, to encompass all of it, is that what really made the difference in his experience is the power of the personal touch. The fact that there were people there as his champion, putting systems in place from the minute he walked onto the campus and helping him navigate that space so that he could go from the student from El Salvador who was DACA to starting his job at Facebook next week. So an incredible, incredible story. So I'm someone who believes that the best way to predict your future is actually to create it. And I think that all of us here today, and this starts with the conference and our conversations, can really come up with ways to use some of the challenges that we find ourselves facing in this nation, in secondary education, in higher education, to think about how we create new models to ensure that we're bringing more students through the pipeline and those students who come through the pipeline are actually successful. So as you go through this conference, I want you to think about a couple of things. Why do you do this work? Why did you get into this field originally? Why do you continue to do it even under the current challenging circumstances? I want you to think of all the Henrys of the world whose lives I'm sure you have already impacted. But I also want you to think of all of the Henrys that are out there waiting for you to impact them through your work, through your advocacy, through your campus politicking. And I wanted to remind you, before you start the conference, that your work matters deeply. It provides opportunities for people, and it fundamentally changes people's lives. And those people go on to change the world. So enjoy your conference.
Well, if you weren't sure what you were here for, you now know. So thank you. That was really amazing. And I'm going to take an opportunity somewhat selfishly because I will not be with you on Wednesday when the conference closes. I have to leave early Wednesday morning for another obligation. You'll have a chance to meet our Director of Admission, Claudia American, who is currently at the ATI meeting, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. He'll be returning late Tuesday night and will be with you on Wednesday. And the reason I want to point out ATI, because it very much relates to what Angel just was talking about, we are at a historic point. I can't remember, I've been working in college admissions since 1991. I cannot remember a time in my work when there has been so much interest and energy in collaboration rather than private strategies for competition at an individual institution, where the energy has shifted to, if we don't figure out how to do this together, we are not going to get it done. And so I look at this conference as one of those opportunities. As I said, Claudio right now is at the American Talent Initiative Conference, which is funded by Bloomberg, which is a new initiative which is pulling together a number of colleges, 130 or so, I think, right now in the United States, that all have been sort of vetted for responsible financial aid and admission practices, with a goal of moving 50,000 low to moderate income students into the college pipeline, 50,000 more by 2025, right? And there are 100 college representatives there right now working on this collaborative effort of data sharing, best practices, goal setting, revisiting those goals each year as an individual institution and also with others. When I think about what is on conference schedules and what the Facebook pages are now for folks who work in higher ed and on the high school side helping students move into higher ed, what those topics are about, as I said, I have never seen a time that is so collaborative. So my ask for all of you is, while you're here, is to use each other, to use this time to really think about what Angel just put in front of us as the topics that we know matter, and to think how important it is that we have the conversations with all of the aspects of the pipeline that are in the room, and then what you leave here, you don't leave this conversation behind. One of the goals of this conference is that everybody can leave with something that they can take back to their institution in whatever your work is and do something. At the very least, you leave with something to talk about that is different than what you were talking about with your staff before you came here. And at best, you've met people that you can collaborate with who you didn't know before, who can be people that you call, people that you choose to do a panel with at a national conference, and that you take what you have here and all of these connections and move forward. I see Abby Friedman here, who was determined to be here when we ran this conference in its second year. And Abby's energy in figuring out how to get here, I believe you got a NACAT grant to come to cover the registration fee because Bowdoin didn't have a subsidy from Jack Kent Could at that point, came here and was persistent in finding a way to be present, was an amazing contributor, and as you can see, is back to participate. That's what we want to have people take from this, is to make the connections and the friendships and have people to call and to carry this network forward into your own work at both the level of your own space, but also at the national level where you can find those moments for conversation. So those would have been my closing remarks if I would have been here for closing remarks, but I'm not going to be, so you got them now. Claudia will make closing remarks, and they might be this similar or they may be a little bit different when you see her on Wednesday. But I will be with all of you tomorrow. So this is my chance to leave the podium. I'm going to pass it over to Justin. Justin, this is my last chance to give a shout out to him. So I just really want to say that Justin has been an amazing leader in pulling together the program this year. There are a lot of people who have been involved. Art has been a tremendous help in certainly securing the money from Jack Kent Cook and also having been part of the planning from the very beginning of the first conference. Certainly Janet's office and a number of folks at Bowdoin who've put a lot of work into this. But Justin really took this and made it twice or 3 times as big as we could have imagined, and has been a really wonderful administrator and thought partner in this conference. So I just want to take a moment to recognize Justin. And also, those of you particularly who work on the high school side will appreciate this. Much of Justin's background before joining us in admissions was being a high school teacher. So I think you'll notice that he has great skills in getting the attention of a room with a lot of his teaching skills. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Justin, who's going to take you through some housekeeping details, but then is going to lead us through an activity where his teaching skills will be on full display. Thank you.
All right, guys, let's do this. Nuts and bolts first, and then we go into an activity. So nuts and bolts. I have to do some thank yous. I know Whitney and Janet have done a number of thank yous already, but I think it's really important to call out the folks who are on the planning committee, the Casco Planning Committee. So when I call your name, please raise your hand or stand up, whatever you feel like, whatever you feel is most appropriate for you at this moment. Let's start. We already know Janet and Whitney. They're good. They're good. They're great. Really important for this conference. Art Rodriguez from Vassar College. And as I'll share in a moment the Jack Kent Cook connection, but without Art's work and his commitment to ensure that we were able to bring together folks from throughout the country, most likely we would not have been able to secure the Jack Kent Cook Foundation money, so thank you again, Art, for that. And Emmanuel Moses from Opportunity Network, he's not here right now, he's at a different conference. Emmanuel. Then Nicole Curvin from Middlebury. Dustin Lin from Battleground Academy. Abby Friedman from Coliseum College Prep Academy. Sarah Miller from Center College. And Steph Gonzalez from Williams College. She's not actually here right now as well. But those folks were instrumental in every part of this conference as well. Next piece. These individuals do have to stand up. Bryce, please stand up, sir. Kyra. You guys don't even know why you're clapping at Bryce. He's just standing up, just a guy standing up. Bryce, Kyra, and Mariette, where are you? Excellent. So, before we clap, the reason these three individuals are standing up, they are considered the clipboard crew. So, we all have our clipboards. They, of course, don't have them with them at the moment, and that's a little bit embarrassing for me, but that's beside the point. So Kyra, Mariette, Bryce are all officers in our admissions office. In addition to these three, we'll have a few other folks who will be joining us tomorrow and on Wednesday. If you have any questions, please see one of us. If we have a clipboard, we probably have a 90% chance of having an answer for you. 10% chance we could say, I don't know, but if that's the case, then that's the case. So once again, Mariette, Kyra, and Bryce. Thank you, guys. And Mariette, please don't sit down. No. You guys need to stand up. Come up here, please. It's part of the activity. Let's go. In terms of the session format, so this is once again part of the nuts and bolts part of this presentation. Session format and specifics. A couple of pieces that might be a little bit strange or unusual, as is the nature of this conference, and I know Whitney alluded to that a couple of moments ago. Namely, Tuesday morning. So tomorrow morning, there are 2 blocks of sessions in the morning. When you guys look through your agenda, you will see that there are the 9 o'clock sessions, there are 5 of them. Discipline gap, financial aid counseling, mental health, high school to college handoff, and political climate shifts. Those 5 sessions will be running simultaneously, and per the nature of this conference, we have randomly assigned you to a session. I know I'm probably going to get some nasty looks from people. I apologize, but this is what my boss asked me to do. So she's right there. She's right there. You are randomly assigned to a session. That session title or name is in the inside flap of your folder. So when you go back to your room, or even if you have it here, you'll flip open your folder and you'll see the session name located there. If you have a question, one of the clipboard crew has the full master list. You can ask them. So once again, tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, the first block of sessions of the day, you are assigned to a session. Second block of sessions, we'll have a break. Then the second block of sessions, you are intended to go to your focus group. And by that we mean either a CBO, the CBO focus group, the admissions focus group, financial aid focus group. Who am I messing? Student affairs, yes, student affairs. High school counselors, yes, I know you're there. High school counselors. So please go to that block, and the facilitator in your session will explain the nature of that second session. It's really an opportunity for you to reflect with your peers, with your direct peers, about the experiences you had in that first randomized session. All right, almost done here. You will see some note takers in your sessions. They are lovely members of our office. Some of them will be working on computers. Some of them will be taking longhand notes. I will compile all of the salient pieces from each of your sessions after the fact and send them out to this entire group. All right. And here we go. Activity. Oh, boy. While I'm getting activity, would one of you guys mind telling everyone where Searles is?
So Searles Hall, which is the building where I believe all of the sessions are being held, is on our main quad, which is when you walk out of this building directly in front of you. Searles Hall is easily recognizable by its coral color. It's pretty distinct. So it's painted brick building, and there's an entrance on this side of the quad and also on the other side if you're parking on Park Row and are commuting.
Thank you. Searles. Casco opening activity. Oh boy. So, as a teacher, I know full well that it is rude of me to read these off of the presentation. So, any volunteers? Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Is that Kate? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Excellent. So you guys probably have noticed that there are Post-it notes and pens. This is the final part of the evening. We will circle back to this activity during the closing session as well. But as Kate just asked you, on a Post-it note with either the magic marker, a pen, pencil, doesn't matter, please add your name and an answer to that first question. Kate, would you mind reading it one more time, please? Excellent, thank you. So what we'll do is we'll give you a, let's actually read through all three, and then you guys can take a solid block of 5 minutes or so and reflect on the three questions. Any volunteers to read the second? Thank you. Excellent. What has been particularly exciting from a professional perspective over the past year? And third and final, Sam, thank you for volunteering from Colby. I see you back there. Excellent, thank you. And that third one is really driving at a point or several points that Angel was making. We're connecting this work to the humans that we impact. And whether it's high school students, whether it's college students, whether it's others, we make impacts on a daily basis. So we're hoping that you guys have an opportunity to sit back, take a moment, and think about these three items. Please put your name on the top of the Post-it. We will collect these, so a member of the clipboard crew will collect them when you're finished, and we will revisit at the closing. Yes? Excellent question. Thank you for the clarifying question. Let's do separate Post-its. Separate Post-its, so name and an answer on separate Post-its, please. So we'll give you guys 2 minutes, and if we need more time, we'll add some. Time check, we have about 1.5 minutes left. Please raise your hand if you need more time. Okay. More time. Yes, names on them. And once you're done, Kyra, Bryce, and Mariette will be walking around to collect them. Let's take 30 more seconds, and then 2 announcements, and we'll be done. Alrighty, I know that a few of you are still writing. Please feel free to keep writing. 2 quick things. The Jack Kent Cooke Foundation, I wanted to circle back here. Please raise your hand if you received financial assistance in some capacity to attend this conference. Excellent. And can we give a round of applause? Nobody from Jack Kent Cooke is here, but Art is here, and he was enormously helpful. And the last piece, this evening, we intentionally did not schedule anything, so you have a free evening. For those of you who have been to Brunswick, you know that the following is a joke. We have many all-night dance clubs in Brunswick. You could Google them. No, we don't. We don't. If you though wanted to go to a bar or a restaurant that is still open at this late hour of 8:15 on a Monday night, please feel free to ask one of the clipboard crew members. Oh, Whitney's going to do it. All right.
So how many folks are staying on campus? Okay, and those of you who are staying off campus, are there folks that are in the Brunswick Hotel and Tavern? Just a couple. Daniel Stone Inn? A couple. Daniel, yeah. So there's a couple places downtown that, well, there's a couple places that are within walking distance from here, depending on where you're parked or if you're staying on campus. The Brunswick Hotel, which is if you're walking down Main Street toward town, just after you're leaving the Bowdoin campus area, on the left-hand side, you'll see the Brunswick Hotel and Tavern, which is a big white building. That bar stays open. It's a very nice hotel environment, and that bar stays open, I think, until 11. There is Joshua's Tavern, which is a little further down into Brunswick on the right-hand side, which is much more of not a hotel bar. It's just not. I don't really know how else to describe it, but it's open. And there are a number of restaurants. Actually, there's a lot of restaurants on Main Street that are really fun. There's a Portland Pie Pizza, which is probably open until 10 or so. There's a wine bar called Enoteca Athena, which is also a restaurant, and I think they're open until 9:30 or 10. So there are a number of places that you can easily walk to, whether you're staying on campus or if you're staying at the Daniel or you're staying at the Brunswick Hotel or one of the Brunswick locations that we offered. Those are all walkable places for you from here or from where you're staying. So. Oh, it's a Monday. Portland Pie is definitely open. The hotel and tavern is open. Joshua's is definitely open. Oh, and gelato. Oh, yes, gelato. If you thought the Bowdoin logs were good, there's Gelato Fiasco, which is on Main Street on the left-hand side if you're walking away from the college. It's a couple blocks down on the left. Really good gelato, actually started by 2 Bowdoin guys. And talk about the entrepreneurial spirit and problem solving. They created a problem and then solved it. So they made you think you need gelato every day. And good thing for us, they're there. They're open year-round, amazing flavors. One of the weird things about Gelato Fiasco is when you go in, it looks like a regular ice cream store with the glass where you can see all the flavors, but there's no line. So it looks like there's a line, but there's really not a line. So you just sort of stand around and look at the flavors, and then as soon as you have the attention of one of the servers, they'll ask you if you want to taste. You can taste as many different flavors as you want, and they can put as many flavors into the smallest ice cream cup you've ever seen. So if you're like, I want 4 in a treat size, which is like the size of a quarter, they'll do it. And if you want the large, you can get a lot in there. And I'm also just going to say, I know all of this because I go there a lot. And there's something called the Red Spoon Club, which won't matter to any of you if you don't think you're coming back here. But if you think you're coming back here, you should sign up, because once you start earning points in a loyalty program, you could get your own flavor. See? See? And I'm going to get my own flavor. I am. I'm thousands of points in. I'm just saying. So when you're there, if you were to go and they're saying, are you part of the Red Spoon Club? And you're like, oh, no. No, you say, yes, I am. Whitney Soule, S-O-U-L-E. And you can put points on my Red Spoon. And so someday when you come back, if you go into Gelato Fiasco and you're like, oh, look, there's a flavor. It's called the Whitney. You had something to do with it. And it's going to be good. So have fun tonight.